It was the night of August 14th, 1992, in the quiet suburb of Springfield, Missouri. 8-year-old Noah Rendell had gone to bed early after a long summer day, the window cracked open to let the humid air drift in. His father, John, an electrical engineer at the local plant, and his mother, Mary, slept in the next room. Nothing about that night should have been remembered. No storm, no sound, no reason for fear, until the morning came. At 7:12 a.m., Mary opened Noah's door and froze. The bed was made, the blanket folded neatly. His favorite toy, a talking teddy bear named Teddy Talker, a cheap plastic thing that recorded and replayed short clips, was gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken locks, no footprints on the lawn. The only trace, police later said, were faint impressions of small bare feet on the carpet, leading from the bed toward the wall and vanishing near the nightlight socket. The investigation became one of the largest in Greene County history. Dozens of volunteers searched the woods, drainage ditches, and old barns. Helicopters scanned for heat signatures. Nothing. As days turned to weeks, the Rendells' home became a monument of grief. The teddy bear was never recovered, and neither was Noah. In 1993, Mary suffered a fatal heart attack. John withdrew completely, keeping the house exactly as it had been. The little room untouched, the nightlight still plugged in. 11 years passed. The wallpaper yellowed. The air grew stale. By spring of 2003, John was living alone in silence. One afternoon, while sorting through boxes in the attic, he found an old cardboard container labeled Noah Toys. Inside, beneath a pile of faded comic books and broken crayons, was the Teddy Talker. Its fur was matted with dust. The speaker grill cracked. The record button jammed inward as if pressed too long ago and never released. John turned it over in his hands, remembering the tiny voice it once captured. "Hi, Daddy." "I'm Noah." He almost threw it away, but something, a quiet impulse, maybe guilt, made him fetch fresh batteries. He sat on the edge of his son's bed, inserted them, and pressed play. At first there was nothing but static. Then a soft click, a child's breathing, a whisper layered with distance and mechanical distortion. "Daddy, it's still dark here." The sound froze him where he sat. The voice, faint, mechanical, and yet unmistakably Noah's, seemed to drift not from the toy, but from somewhere just behind it, like a signal bleeding through time. John's breath hitched as the bear crackled again. "Daddy, I can't find the light." Then silence. He pressed the play button again, rewound, listened. Same words, same pause, the same trembling whisper. It wasn't one of the old recordings. John knew every message Noah had ever made, knew his tone when he laughed, the way he mispronounced Teddy. This was different. It sounded older somehow, as if recorded after the boy had vanished. That night, John sat in the living room staring at the bear on the coffee table. The red LED light still faintly pulsing as though waiting. The power in the house flickered twice, the clock resetting to 12-hour each time. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it a high, oscillating hum that seemed to seep through the walls. In the days that followed, John became obsessed. He connected the toy to an old cassette deck, rewinding the tape, amplifying the sound, trying to isolate the noise behind Noah's words. Buried beneath the static was something rhythmic, like the slow pulsing of a generator or the distant turn of metal wheels. He took the recording to a friend, a retired radio technician named Marvin Cole, who ran a repair shop on the edge of town. Marvin listened once, frowned, and then again, this time through headphones. "That background tone," he said, "it's not environmental. It's modulated. Almost like a transmission." John didn't understand. "From where?" Marvin shrugged, uneasy. "Not here, maybe not now." They decided to analyze the tape in the back room of the shop. As Marvin ran it through a spectrum analyzer, the display formed strange symmetrical shapes, mirrored peaks, evenly spaced hums that didn't belong to any known frequency. At one point, Marvin stepped back, whispering, "That's not random. That's patterned." Then, just as suddenly, the screen went black, and every light in the store flickered out for exactly 7 seconds. When the power returned, the tape inside the deck had unspooled itself, and the plastic case of the Teddy Talker was warm to the touch. John took it home and locked it in a drawer. But that night, lying in bed, he heard it again, softly through the vent system, faint but real. The same voice repeating the same words, now followed by a new phrase that made his blood run cold. "Daddy." You're getting closer. John didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house felt magnified. The creak of the floorboards, the faint ticking of the hallway clock, the low hum of the refrigerator. Just before dawn, he walked back into Noah's room and sat on the edge of the small bed. The teddy talker lay where he'd left it, its eyes catching the pale blue light from the window. The air felt charged like before a storm. He pressed play again, static, then the breathing. Then Noah's voice, clearer now, no longer broken by interference. "Daddy, you're getting closer." "It's cold here." John felt tears forming before the rational part of his mind could stop them. He spoke out loud, trembling. "Noah? Can you hear me?" Silence. Then a faint click. The tape reversed itself, and out of that reverse static came a sound like metal scraping concrete, followed by what could only be described as footsteps echoing in a hollow corridor. The device clicked off by itself. John stood there frozen, his mind caught between disbelief and an instinctive terror that had no logic, only weight. That morning he called the Springfield Police Department, asking if there was any way the recording could be analyzed officially. They refused. Old missing person case, no new evidence, nothing admissible. So John reached out to a woman named Ellen Briggs, a local journalist who'd covered the original disappearance back in the 90s. When she arrived 2 days later, she found the house exactly as it had been described in her old notes. Dust-covered frames. A clock stuck at 2:43, the boy's drawings still taped to the wall. John played her the tape. The expression on her face changed from sympathy to pale confusion. "That's his voice," she whispered. "But he sounds older." Ellen insisted on recording the playback using her digital recorder, but when she tried, the file corrupted every time. Each attempt ended with the same strange digital hiss, a low rising tone that built into a sharp pop, like feedback underwater. That night she stayed at the house, unable to shake what she'd heard. Just before midnight, both she and John woke up to the same sound. The toy speaking on its own from Noah's room. No one had touched it. Ellen followed John down the hallway as the voice played. Distorted, layered with whispers that seemed to overlap. Phrases half-formed, light door under down here. The last words were so clear they didn't need replaying. "Dad?" The door's open now. And then, for the first time in 11 years, the nightlight in Noah's room flickered off by itself. John lunged toward the outlet, pulling the plug, but the darkness in the room remained total, thick. Oppressive swallowing sound itself. Ellen's recorder was still running, the red light blinking faintly as if underwater. Then the teddy talker began to whir again, its mechanical voice box grinding through layers of static, until a slow rhythmic knocking came through. 3 knocks, a pause, then 2. John froze. That pattern. He knew it. It was the same rhythm he used to knock on Noah's door before bedtime. The sound grew louder, resonating not from the bear but from inside the wall behind the nightstand. He pressed his ear against the drywall. There it was again, 3, pause 2. Ellen whispered, "It's coming from inside." John fetched a flashlight and screwdriver. The beam shook as he peeled away the wallpaper, revealing an older layer beneath. Blue paint faded with small handprints smeared in dust. He pried out a section of the wall. A wave of stale, cold air spilled out, carrying a smell of earth and iron. Behind the insulation was a narrow, hollow space, about 2 feet wide, running vertically down between the studs. The flashlight beam caught something deeper inside, metal glinting. He reached in and pulled out a rusted tin lunchbox. The lid was sealed with electrical tape, marked with a strip of masking tape labeled Noah, 1992. Ellen stepped back, covering her mouth. John peeled the tape away and opened it. Inside were old cassette reels, brittle and yellowed, each marked with the same date, AUG 14. There were 5 of them, labeled sequentially. One had a note attached in Noah's uneven handwriting. "This one plays backward." John felt his vision blur, his heart pounding so loud he could barely hear Ellen urging him to stop. But he didn't. He threaded the tape into the teddy talker, pressed rewind, then play. The sound came slowly, like a whisper bleeding through a tunnel. At first there was laughter, Noah's but layered with something else, deeper, distorted, like another version of his voice speaking under it. And then came words, reversed but eerily clear, not gone. "Under the hum," Ellen gasped, realizing the background noise was identical to the one Marvin had described, the steady, droning pulse, like machinery in motion far below the ground. She turned to John and said, "This isn't a toy. It's a transmitter." But before he could respond, every electronic device in the house, clock, radio, fridge, came alive at once, syncing to the same frequency, the same hum, vibrating through the floorboards until the walls themselves seemed to breathe. And then the Teddy Talker spoke again, one final time, its voice now neither child nor machine. "He found the door, John. Do you hear him?" John dropped the bear and the sound cut off instantly, leaving behind a ringing silence that seemed alive. Ellen stood frozen in the doorway, her recorder dead, its battery indicator flickering between full and empty. The air smelled faintly of ozone, as if lightning had struck somewhere close. John could feel it in his bones. The hum hadn't stopped. It had just gone deeper, beneath the floor, below the foundation. They went down to the basement together, moving through the narrow stairwell as dust rained from the ceiling. The basement was a low concrete space lined with old tools and boxes. John hadn't been down there in years. As the flashlight swept across the far wall, Ellen noticed something strange. A rectangular outline faintly visible under layers of grey paint. "There," she whispered. John wiped it clean with his sleeve, revealing what looked like a sealed hatch roughly 3 feet across, bolted shut. Embedded in the metal were tiny handprints, unmistakably a child's, pressed into the paint before it dried. The hum grew stronger the closer they stood to it. It wasn't a sound now. It was a vibration in the ribs, a tremor that seemed to sync with their pulse. Ellen began filming on her backup camera, whispering notes into the mic. "This isn't structural. It's not in the blueprints," John muttered. He knew because he'd helped build this basement himself, cinder block by cinder block. This shouldn't be here. He reached for a wrench and began loosening one of the rusted bolts. The sound that came out was low and hollow, like air escaping from something vast. The flashlight flickered once, twice, then stabilized. When the last bolt fell, the hatch shifted slightly on its own. A slow, reluctant movement as if pushed from the other side. A gust of air impossibly cold washed over them. It carried a smell that Ellen later described as wet concrete and burnt wires. She held the camera steady while John, shaking, pulled the hatch open. Behind it was a narrow shaft descending straight down into blackness, reinforced with corroded metal rungs. From below came the same low mechanical drone they'd heard on the tape, steady, ancient, rhythmic. And beneath that, faint but undeniable, the sound of a child humming. John called out, "Noah!" The humming stopped. Then, after a pause, a small voice echoed up the shaft, distant, layered with metallic distortion, but still his. "I told you the door's open." "Daddy!" Ellen nearly dropped the camera, stumbling back as John leaned toward the darkness, the flashlight trembling in his grip. "Noah?" he called again, louder now, his voice cracking with something raw and desperate. The reply came slower this time, as if struggling to push through distance or static. "It's cold, but I can see now." The words stretched, fractured, each syllable dragging through metal. Ellen whispered, "John, it's a trick, it's feedback or something." But even she didn't sound convinced. The flashlight beam pierced only a few feet before dissolving into the void. There was no visible bottom, no sound of dripping water, no echo of depth, just that hum, constant and deep, like the turning of an invisible engine far below. Against every instinct of reason, John placed one foot on the upper rung. The metal was icy, so cold it burned. "I'm not leaving him," he said quietly. Ellen grabbed his arm. "If you go down there, I'm calling the police." He looked at her with hollow eyes. They already stopped listening 11 years ago. And then he began to climb. The flashlight followed his descent, the beam flickering as he moved lower, each metallic clank of his boots swallowed almost immediately by the dark. The hum grew louder, now accompanied by faint mechanical creaks like shifting gears buried deep underground. Helen stood at the opening, recording, whispering a running log through shaking breath, subject descending approximately 15 feet. No visible end. Then abruptly the hum cut out. Silence total and suffocating. "John?" she called. No answer. Only the faint sound of breathing through the recorder's mic. Hers. She crouched, angling the flashlight down the shaft, when suddenly a second beam of light appeared below, faint and shaky. John's flashlight. "I see something," his voice echoed faintly. "It's a room." Ellen couldn't hear the rest. The connection dissolved into a wash of static, and then, faintly, the voice of a child, closer than before, whispering directly into her recorder's mic. He shouldn't have opened it. The sound came from behind her. Ellen spun around, the flashlight catching only empty walls. The basement lights flickered on for a single second, revealing the hatch now half closed, the bolts sliding themselves back into place, metal groaning under invisible pressure. She lunged forward, trying to hold it open, but the cold radiating from the shaft was paralyzing. From the gap, she could hear John screaming, his voice blending with Noah's, overlapping in impossible ways, like two frequencies occupying the same channel. Then, as the final bolt sealed, there was a burst of sound, a single tone, piercing and electronic, and everything went black. When Ellen woke, it was morning. The basement was silent, the hatch gone as if it had never existed. The floor where it once had been showed no seams, no marks of repair, just smooth concrete. Her camera was lying beside her, still recording, though the footage showed only 2 minutes of static followed by a low mechanical hum that didn't match any known frequency. Police found no trace of John Rendell. The official report listed him as missing, presumed dead. Ellen left Springfield soon after, quitting journalism entirely, but 2 years later in 2005, a local radio hobbyist in St. Louis reported picking up an untraceable signal on the shortwave band at exactly 2:43 a.m., a looping child's voice repeating a broken phrase, "Under the hum." The door's still open. For months after John Rendell's disappearance, the house on Sycamore Lane remained sealed, tagged with the yellow tape of an unresolved investigation. Neighbors avoided the property, claiming they could still hear faint electrical buzzing at night, even with the power disconnected. The police report was clinical, subject missing, basement structure intact, no evidence of foul play. But Ellen Briggs knew what she'd seen, or rather what she'd heard. The footage from her camera became her obsession. She sent the corrupted tape to multiple analysts across the country, and each time the response was the same: audio degradation consistent with electromagnetic interference. Yet buried deep within the static, under layers of compression, she could still make out fragments of voices, warped by distance and time, John's muffled shouts, Noah's whisper, and something else, mechanical, inhuman, murmuring in intervals like an automated process, repeating a command. In November 2004, Ellen drove back to Springfield. The house was scheduled for demolition. The city wanted to redevelop the lot, but when she arrived, the crew refused to enter the property. Their machines shut off on their own, fuel lines corroded overnight, and one worker swore he saw a boy standing in the window upstairs, though there were no footprints in the frost. Ellen bribed her way past the fence and entered through the back door, armed only with a small recorder and a flashlight. The air inside was still. No smell of decay, no dust, as though the house existed in its own sealed vacuum. The clock on the wall read 2:43. It wasn't plugged in. Upstairs, Noah's room remained perfectly intact. The bed made, the nightlight still in the socket, the wallpaper curling at the corners. On the floor sat the teddy talker. She froze. It was pristine. Clean fur, bright eyes, no sign of age. She lifted it carefully, noticing that its battery compartment had been soldered shut from the inside. Still, when she pressed the play button, it whirred to life without power. The voice was unmistakable, now layered, older, like John and Noah speaking in unison. "Ellen, you shouldn't be here." She dropped it instantly, stumbling back toward the door, but every exit she turned toward was gone, replaced by blank wall. The air grew dense, pressing inward, the low hum building again from beneath the floor, vibrating through her chest cavity. The toy's head turned slightly, and from its speaker came the distant sound of a mechanical rhythm, slow and pulsating, like something massive breathing underground. Then a faint scraping, the unmistakable sound of the hatch opening somewhere below. The floorboards groaned. A thin crack split the hardwood beneath her feet, light seeping through it, not bright but grey, dim, like fog illuminated from within. She fell to her knees, listening. Beneath the floor, faint and rhythmic, came footsteps, small, deliberate, like a child pacing in circles. Then a whisper rose through the boards, so close it brushed her ear. "He brought the light, Miss Briggs." The entire house seemed to exhale, every bulb flashing once in unison. She screamed and scrambled toward the staircase, But where it should have been was only a blank wall of plaster. The hum intensified, now rising in pitch until it became a pure physical vibration that rattled her bones. The Teddy Talker spoke again in that doubled voice. "He's home now." Then silence. When city workers entered 3 days later, they found the house completely empty. Furniture, wallpaper, everything gone except a single item sitting in the center of the bare concrete floor. A small cassette, labeled AUG 14, play backward. The tape was sent to evidence, but was later reported missing from storage. Officially, the case was closed. Unofficially, the tape began resurfacing years later, passed between paranormal archivists and radio enthusiasts under a new name, the Springfield Recording. No one has ever been able to play it twice. The first playback always ends with the same phrase, buried deep in static, in a voice that seems to age mid-sentence. The hum is still here, and it remembers. In the years that followed, the Springfield Recording spread quietly through the corners of the internet, where rational people rarely linger. Amateur archivists, night radio hosts, paranormal researchers, all of them claimed to have obtained copies. None could trace its source. Each insisted their file was clean, but every version carried the same underlying signature, a low-frequency oscillation between 17 and 19 hertz, inaudible to most, yet powerful enough to induce the same visceral unease, that sense of pressure behind the eyes. In 2008, a technician at WZPR Community Radio in Kansas uploaded a cleaned spectrogram of the audio, expecting to see static patterns. Instead, the graph revealed a faint image, lines forming what appeared to be a floor plan. At the center, beneath labeled coordinates resembling those of the Rendell property, a small handprint appeared in digital artifacting, accompanied by 3 words embedded in Morse-like blips, "Under the hum." The technician deleted the file within hours after his hard drive began looping its own recorded sound. Days later, he was found unconscious at his desk, the same 3 knocks, 3-2, recorded faintly through the building's ventilation ducts. Meanwhile, the Springfield lot where the Rendell house once stood was redeveloped into a small cul-de-sac called Crescent Hollow. 6 homes were built there between 2009 and 2012. Within 5 years, all but 1 family had moved away. Reports varied, faulty wiring, strange power surges, chronic migraines, but every resident described the same phenomenon: clocks resetting nightly to 2:43 a.m., and children waking with identical phrases scribbled on their notebooks or walls. "It's still open. Come downstairs." One homeowner, a nurse named Lydia Granger, recorded a series of sleep-talking episodes from her 6-year-old daughter, Ava. In one, Ava's voice was layered, her normal tone overlaid with something mechanical, older. "He's close. Daddy's close." The recordings were sent to the State University for analysis, but by the time researchers accessed them, every file had corrupted into a flat line of gray noise. Helen Briggs, long retired and living under a different name in Arizona, heard about the neighborhood from an old contact and decided to visit the site in 2014. Her health had declined. Her hands shook, but she was still haunted by the hum she'd heard that night. The cul-de-sac was quiet, ordinary. Children's bikes leaned against mailboxes. Wind chimes swayed in the summer air. But when she reached the spot where she remembered the Rendell house once stood, she noticed something wrong with the symmetry of the street. The pavement dipped slightly, the houses on either side leaning inward, as though the ground were breathing. The air pressure changed, the kind of shift she recognized instantly. That same vibration, low, slow, rising through her shoes into her legs. She stopped, heart pounding, realizing she was standing directly over where the basement hatch had been. She bent down, pressing a hand to the asphalt. It was warm. Then faintly from below came a rhythmic tapping. 3-2. She whispered, "John?" And the answer came back, not in her ears but through the ground, through her bones, still dark, still here. That night she checked into a motel off Highway 60 and tried to write everything down, but her laptop crashed repeatedly, every new document overwritten by the same message: "The light isn't for you." In her final voicemail to a colleague, Ellen's voice trembled. "It's still active, whatever it is. It's transmitting through the foundation, through time maybe. The door never closed, it just changed shape." The message ends abruptly with a single tone, the same frequency found in the Springfield tape. No one ever heard from her again. Her car was discovered 2 days later, parked at the edge of the construction site, engine running. Headlights pointed toward a manhole in the center of the cul-de-sac. The cover had been removed. A flashlight lay beside it, still warm. From deep below, workers reported hearing faint music, like a child humming to himself in the dark. By 2017, Crescent Hollow had become a place people spoke about only in half-whispers, a suburban ghost story disguised as local caution. The city had stopped selling the remaining lots, claiming soil instability, though no geological reports were ever filed. Contractors who tried to resurface the road complained of their machinery seizing, GPS systems freezing, and one excavator operator swore that his depth gauge displayed 1192 before shutting down completely, as though measuring below the ground that existed. By winter, the cul-de-sac sat mostly empty. Only one house was still occupied, number 6 at the far end of the curve, by a man named Walter Brandt, a retired mail carrier who'd bought the property cheap after his wife's death. He'd told friends the strange rumors didn't bother him. But in December, Walter began documenting a series of nightly disturbances, hearing what he described as voices traveling through the furnace ducts. Like a kid talking through tin cans, he posted one audio clip online, only seconds long before his account disappeared. The clip began with silence, then a soft mechanical pulse, and finally a boy's voice whispering, "You're standing where my bed was." That upload reignited the old story. Investigators traced the recording's background noise to a low-frequency source consistent with subterranean machinery. But there was no construction, no tunnels, no cables beneath Crescent Hollow. Then, as quickly as the noise had surfaced, it spread, appearing in the background of police scanner channels, amateur radio frequencies, and baby monitors across Missouri. At exactly 2:43 a.m. every night, listeners across a 60-mile radius began hearing the same 5-second broadcast. A hum, a child's breath, and a short phrase, "Doors still open." When the FCC investigated, they found no source, no tower, no frequency match. They called it phantom carrier wave activity, filed it under atmospheric anomaly, and closed the report. But it didn't stop. In spring 2018, the local utility grid recorded an unexplained surge lasting precisely 7 seconds, every light in the area flickering simultaneously, as home security cameras captured a faint image, a small figure standing motionless in the cul-de-sac center, illuminated by the streetlight glow. The footage pixelated before anyone could isolate a face, but what remained visible were the proportions: child-sized, head slightly tilted, one hand raised as though knocking. A week later, crews sent to inspect the power lines discovered the asphalt in that exact spot had sunk 3 inches overnight, revealing circular indentations beneath, the outline of a sealed hatch. The metal was warm. Every attempt to lift it failed. Tools broke, drills overheated, and sensors misfired. One engineer quit mid-project after claiming to hear a breathing sound from underneath, like air being drawn in slow, deliberate gulps. Soon after, Crescent Hollow was abandoned for good. Nature reclaimed the lots, vines swallowing mailboxes, houses stripped for copper, the air there always faintly charged. By 2020, the site was fenced off completely. But trespassers still came, urban explorers, streamers, thrill-seekers. They left graffiti across the cracked pavement. "The hum is home." Most recordings from their nights are mundane, wind and static. A few, however, contain fragments of something else. In one, recovered from a phone found half buried near the cul-de-sac center, a voice whispers over the static, "He's still trying to climb out." The phone's metadata placed the recording at 2:43 a.m. sharp. Experts who cleaned the audio found another voice beneath the first, an older man's, distant and broken, repeating through interference, "Noah, take my hand. I can see the light." It fades, then cuts, replaced by a tone that lasts exactly 7 seconds, the same tone that's haunted every version of the Springfield tape for over 3 decades. As of 2025, Crescent Hollow remains sealed, though locals swear that on windless nights, you can still hear it, the hum, faint and patient, vibrating through the ground like a heart that never stopped beating. And if you stand long enough at the fence, some say you'll feel a gentle tapping underfoot, 3, pause 2. A rhythm that doesn't ask for attention, only recognition. By early 2025, the Crescent Hollow property had become what locals called the quiet zone. The fences still stood, though the city records didn't list who maintained them. Once or twice a month, utility workers reported finding new padlocks on the gates, all of the same type, none registered to municipal supply. Local teens continued breaking in, drawn by the myth, but most didn't stay long. The few who did post their footage online usually deleted it within hours, claiming audio corruption or weird feedback. One clip, however, survived, filmed on a cracked phone sometime that January. It showed the cul-de-sac under pale moonlight, the camera jerking as the filmer whispered, "Do you hear that? It's under the ground." Then the phone mic caught it, a deep rhythmic hum, steady, pulsing like the slow spin of a distant turbine. The video ended when the screen went white and a distorted child's voice overlapped the audio. "Don't open it again." In February, the Springfield Police Department reopened the Rendell file, not officially, but as what one detective later called a courtesy look. Detective Clara Mendez, who'd grown up in the area, led the quiet review. She was skeptical but curious. Her uncle had been one of the original search volunteers in '92. She began by cross-referencing the new viral footage with old property blueprints. The alignment was exact. The sound's strongest point in the video corresponded to where the Rendell basement once sat. Out of procedure, she requested a structural survey, claiming it might pose a safety risk if the ground was unstable. The results came back inconclusive. The scanner showed anomalous voids, but the data was unreadable, as if the echo from the radar was being absorbed. The technician wrote one line in his notes: "Signal reflection returned inverted, like the ground hummed back." Within a week, 2 of the technicians refused to return. One described losing power in his truck radio every time he passed the site. Another swore he heard a knocking pattern in the static. 3 knocks, pause 2. The city shelved the survey and resealed the area. But Mendez didn't stop. She obtained the original 2003 audio from the Teddy Talker, preserved on a warped cassette, still sitting in evidence storage. For weeks, she replayed the noise through forensic software, filtering layer after layer of static. What she found made her stop breathing for a moment. Beneath the low hum was a rhythmic pulse, a sequence that repeated every 1192 seconds. When slowed down and frequency shifted, the pattern formed phonetic peaks matching human speech cadence. And inside it, faint, she heard a child's voice whispering the same words from the Springfield tape. Under the hum. She sent the file to the state lab in Jefferson City for verification. The response came back 2 days later. No known mechanical source. Organic modulation pattern consistent with prepubescent male voice. Recording timestamp appears continuous. No splice detected. In other words, whatever that voice was, it was recorded live. That night, March 14, 2025, Mendez returned to Crescent Hollow alone, armed with a small handheld frequency scanner. The air was still, colder than the weather forecast suggested. She approached the center of the cul-de-sac, where the asphalt had begun to crack in a near-perfect circle. The scanner's meter flickered weakly, then began to pulse in rhythm with the faint vibration underfoot. She crouched, pressed the device to the ground, and for a moment, the hum seemed to pause, as if listening. Then it started again, louder, closer, carrying a pattern she recognized instantly. 3 knocks, pause 2. Her body froze. The recorder on her vest captured her last words before the transmission dissolved into static. "It's responding." "There's something," followed by the low mechanical tone that lasted exactly 7 seconds. The next morning, her patrol car was found parked along Route 60. Engine still running, driver's door open, lights on. There were no footprints around the vehicle. The scanner lay on the passenger seat, its screen frozen mid-reading, displaying only 2 words on a corrupted line of text. "Door open, that's where the official file ends." But residents near the old lot still say that on windless nights, if you park along the fence and cut the engine, you can hear it faintly through the steering wheel, through the ground beneath your shoes, a soft vibration that rises and falls like breathing. Always the same time, always the same rhythm. 3, pause, 2. By late spring 2025, the Rendell story had quietly bled back into public consciousness, not through television or headlines, but through the slow churn of digital folklore. Reddit threads, late-night podcasts, shortwave hobbyists, all orbiting the same phrase, the hum knows names. Detective Clara Mendez's disappearance had never been acknowledged publicly, but her final dashcam file had leaked in fragments. The footage was short, just under 4 minutes, but it was enough. It showed her cruiser idling at the Crescent Hollow fence line. She steps out, flashlight in one hand, the scanner in the other. The beam catches the mist above the asphalt, the cracks in the road like veins in pale skin. Her voice, calm but strained, narrates into her recorder. Signal active. Low band, 72 Hz repeating. Source non-directional. Sounds like... Then the rest collapses into static, followed by that familiar awful rhythm. 3 knocks, pause, 2. On the final frame, the flashlight flickers, and her reflection, caught in the car window, appears to move a fraction later than she does, mouth-forming words she never says aloud. That footage was pulled within hours of surfacing, but mirror uploads multiplied faster than takedowns. Within weeks, it had become the backbone of the Hollow Pattern, a 10-part podcast by journalist and audio archivist Henry Cross. Cross's narration was level, clinical. He wasn't a believer. He framed the Rendell case as an unsolved disappearance, tangled in power grid interference and collective hysteria. But by episode 6, his tone had shifted. He began incorporating listener submissions, field recordings, low-hum captures, reports of electronic malfunctions across the Midwest. Some were hoaxes, some weren't. One night, during a live Q&A, a caller identifying herself only as Lydia G., a name that would later connect her to the last family that had lived on the cul-de-sac, phoned in with a trembling voice. He's still under there. They're keeping him alive in the noise. Before Cross could respond, the broadcast feed fractured into a low mechanical tone. For 7 seconds, every connected listener's stream emitted the same frequency spike. The show never resumed. Cross vanished the following week. His laptop was recovered in his studio, speakers humming faintly though the system was powered down. In May, 2 separate incidents reignited the case. First, a storm cell over Greene County caused a local power substation to fail. Security footage from 2:43 a.m. captured a rolling brownout wave moving across the grid. Streetlights dimming one by one toward Crescent Hollow, the blackout spreading like a pulse. Then at 2:44, every circuit in the district overloaded simultaneously, tripping breakers across 3 counties. Technicians described it as a heartbeat made of electricity. The outage lasted 7 minutes. When the lights came back, nothing was damaged, but in the electrical logs, one consistent timestamp appeared in every transformer's data stream, OGI 14-1992. The second event came days later, when a contractor tasked with removing the Crescent Hollow fencing found fresh footprints in the asphalt, barefoot, small, perfectly pressed into the softened tar, as if left moments before. They led to the center of the cul-de-sac and stopped. A few feet away, half buried in the dirt, lay a corroded toy cassette recorder, the same model as the old Teddy Talker. Inside it, a new tape. The label, written in fading blue ink, Noah. 11 years later, the tape was sent to evidence but was never catalogued. An anonymous upload appeared on a private forum 3 nights later, a grainy audio file titled dooropen.wav. It began with silence, then the faint hum, now uneven, almost breathing. A man's voice, John Rendell's unmistakable, spoke softly, haltingly. "It's been so long, buddy. I found it again." Then beneath him, a child's whisper answered, "I know. Daddy, it's your turn." The clip ended with the sound of something metallic sliding shut, followed by 3 knocks, pause, 2, and then nothing. As of June 2025, the lot remains sealed. The power company denies all correlation, law enforcement refuses comment, and the internet has moved on, mostly. But people who live near that stretch of road in Springfield still say their clocks blink to 2:43 now and then, even after power surges that never happen anywhere else. Truckers passing on Route 60 report their radios catching faint fragments of a voice calling from under static, repeating almost gently, "The light's on again." And sometimes, if you stop your car and turn everything off, you'll hear it through the frame, the same slow pulse rising from the soil, patient and familiar, echoing across 33 years of silence. 3 knocks. Pause. 2. By the summer of 2025, the case had reached a point where rumor and record began to blend into something untraceable. There was no official investigation left, only fragments, local police reports missing pages, FOIA requests denied under public safety exemptions, and a widening network of anonymous uploads that all shared one impossible feature. Each was time-stamped exactly 2:43 a.m. Each contained a low hum that matched the original Springfield tape within a 0.03 Hz deviation, and every one, no matter how far from Missouri, carried a faint voice at the edge of hearing, a voice that sounded like it was traveling through miles of earth. In July, a small tech YouTube channel called Signal Noise posted an episode titled The Frequency That Breathes. The hosts, 2 graduate students from Illinois State, had downloaded a supposed clean copy of the DoorOpen.wave file to analyze its structure. They streamed their experiment live to a few thousand viewers. For the first few minutes, the waveform looked normal, random static, no embedded metadata. But at the 6-minute mark, when they applied a phase inversion filter, the hum shifted and the chat went silent. On screen, the oscilloscope showed perfect symmetry, 2 mirror peaks converging into a heartbeat pattern. The speakers emitted a tone low enough to rattle the camera's mic, and one of the hosts muttered, "It's modulating back." Then the lights dimmed. The image on the oscilloscope flattened into a thin line, and from the speakers came a faint mechanical whine, rising until a child's whisper cut through it. "It's not the house anymore." The stream ended abruptly. When the video reappeared hours later, it was only a 3-minute loop of white noise. Both hosts deleted their accounts that same day. Around that time, residents near the old Crescent Hollow site began reporting something new, not the hum, but silence. The kind of silence that presses on the eardrums, like the moment before an explosion. Pets refused to cross the fence line. Birds avoided the trees around the perimeter. One night in August, a delivery driver's dash cam captured a pale shimmer rising from the cracked asphalt, like heat haze in reverse, spiraling upward before collapsing back into the ground. Analysts later determined the footage showed a subtle light distortion, consistent with electromagnetic mirage. But frame by frame, just before the distortion faded, the ground appeared to open slightly, as if breathing. 2 days later, emergency dispatch received multiple 911 calls from the same block, reporting a child knocking under the street. The responding officers arrived to find the asphalt vibrating, the sound recorded clearly on their body cams. 3 knocks. Pause. 2. The footage ends when the car radios burst into the same tone that's haunted every record of the Rendell case, lasting precisely 7 seconds. When playback was restored, both timestamps had reset to AUG 14-1992 or 2:43 a.m. By September, Crescent Hollow was fenced off again, this time under federal jurisdiction. Locals watched unmarked trailers roll in overnight, leaving before dawn. The hum hasn't returned, but some say the silence itself hums like a frequency too low to register consciously. At 2:43 a.m., motion sensors in nearby houses trigger for no reason. Porch lights flicker once, and across Springfield, old cassette players sometimes click to life unprompted, spinning empty reels that whisper through their static, almost softly, almost kind. He's still looking for the door. No one has lived on that land for more than a decade. Yet the records remain open, unfinished, and every so often another piece surfaces, a corrupted voicemail, a power log, a faint recording from somewhere hundreds of miles away. Always the same heartbeat hum beneath it, always the same timestamp. 33 years after a boy vanished from his bed in the middle of a quiet Missouri night, the only certainty left is that something down there still remembers being found. And it waits. In October 2025, a cold front settled over Greene County, bringing a long stretch of still, dry nights. The kind that made sound travel. People living miles from Crescent Hollow started filing the same complaints. Vibrations in the floors around 2:40 a.m., lights dimming without a flicker on the grid, dogs pacing in circles and whining at basement walls. At first the power company blamed aging lines, but one lineman took his own notes. On the nights he was dispatched to the hollow perimeter, his voltage meter jumped every 11 minutes, in a pulse that exactly matched the frequency from the Rendell tape. He told a friend off record, "It's like the ground is drawing current." A week later, the fence around Crescent Hollow was cut in 3 places. No one claimed responsibility, but the following morning, hikers in the nearby woods found footprints in the frost leading toward the site, one set adult-sized, one child-sized, both barefoot. They stopped at the edge of the cul-de-sac, where the asphalt sagged in a shallow circle. From that point on, the footprints simply ended that same week. Local AM radio station KSPR 1420 began picking up an interference pattern that blanketed the airwaves each night between 2:40 and 2:50 a.m. The signal didn't match any licensed frequency, yet it came through every receiver in town. The engineer on duty described it as a heartbeat under static. When he recorded the pattern and played it backward, the waveform spelled out a rhythm: 3, pause, 2. The last few seconds contained a soft voice, half mechanical, half human, repeating, "The light's moving." The next night, the station broadcast cut out mid-show. When the feed returned, the DJ was gone. The studio lights were still on, the mic live, but the room empty. Police later found a cassette tape in the recorder, labeled John and Noah. The audio was 7 minutes long. The first half was quiet, filled with ambient hum and the faint clatter of equipment. The second half contained 2 voices whispering over each other. The older one saying, "It's not your fault." So the younger answering, "I can see you now." By Halloween, the area was cordoned off completely. Reporters from St. Louis arrived, but were escorted out before sunset. That night, people across the county saw the sky flicker once like lightning without thunder. Cell towers registered a surge of unknown origin, a 7-second spike that synchronized every clock within a 100-mile radius to 2:43 a.m. Then came the noise. It began low, deep beneath the pavement, a pulse that rippled outward through pipes. Foundations, car frames, metal fences, anything that could carry vibration. Security cameras caught the street lamps trembling, as if in wind that didn't exist. The hum climbed in pitch until, for exactly 1 minute, it crossed into the audible range, a long, resonant tone that sounded less like a machine and more like a breath being drawn. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. When residents emerged the next morning, the cul-de-sac was gone. Where the road had been, there was a depression about 10 feet deep, perfectly round, lined with glassy soil fused by heat. At its center lay a single object, a melted cassette shell, the tape inside fused into a spiral. Under direct sunlight, it still vibrated faintly, emitting a pulse that microphones could not record, but that anyone standing close enough could feel in their chest. The site was sealed again within hours, this time by state emergency management. Officials cited soil instability due to subsidence. No one argued. But in the weeks that followed, new recordings began surfacing across the region. Doorbell cameras, baby monitors, voice assistants, all catching the same distant pattern at 2:43 a.m. 3 knocks, pause 2. One of those clips, traced to a farmhouse 50 miles north, carried a whisper layered in the background, older now, rasping but unmistakably human. "It's open," but not for long. No one has confirmed who spoke those words. Some say it was a prank. Others insist it was the first time in 33 years that both voices, the father and the son, were heard together, speaking from somewhere far below, where the hum has never stopped, only waited. By December 2025, the Crescent Hollow site was erased from official maps. Satellite imagery blurred the area into a neutral smear of grey-green pixels, as if the land itself refused to render. But people still came. Not the thrill-seekers anymore, journalists, engineers, 1 or 2 men from the Bureau who spoke in clipped tones and carried devices that ticked softly when the wind died. They stayed only briefly. Each night the hum returned, faint, distant, patient. You could feel it more than hear it, a low vibration that pressed through the soles of your shoes, like standing on the lid of something vast. The final account came from a road crew supervisor named Thomas Heller, who filed a maintenance report on December 22nd. His crew had been assigned to check utility lines near the old perimeter. At 2:37 a.m., their equipment began to malfunction, GPS scrambling, compasses spinning. Then, without warning, every radio in the trucks activated, broadcasting the same frequency tone. 7 seconds, pure and clean. Hella stepped out of the cab to find the air trembling, as though the ground itself had begun to breathe again. The cul-de-sac, long buried under layers of new soil and concrete, had split open into a perfect circle of exposed earth. From its center rose a column of mist, glowing faintly, pulsing with the rhythm of a heartbeat. He described it later in a trembling voice, as a sound that wasn't sound, like something was remembering how to be alive. The mist thickened, swirling into a shape barely human. For a second, two figures seemed to stand there, one smaller, one taller, their silhouettes flickering between static and shadow. Hella swore he heard them speak, one word in perfect unison: light. Then the glow collapsed inward, leaving only silence. When emergency teams arrived minutes later, the pit was gone. The earth had resealed itself. Hella left town soon after. His final voicemail to his supervisor contained 7 seconds of static and a whisper, so faint it was almost lost under the noise. They closed it. In the months that followed, the hum faded for the first time in 33 years. Radios stayed silent, clocks kept time. The air above Crescent Hollow felt ordinary again. But at 2:43 a.m., on nights when the wind is still and the world holds its breath, some say you can feel a pulse beneath the ground, steady, slow, remembering. And if you knock 3 times, pause then 2, you might hear a small echo knock back, not from above but from far, far below. Not a warning, not a haunting, just the sound of something once lost, still reaching toward the light.